Robin Williams. Welcome to the what, Bob?
Oh, nothing, Mark.
Welcome
Didn't
to
know you were
Straight
going to
Outta.
do that.
Yeah, welcome to Straight Outta Workers Compensation Podcast. My name is Mark Pugh, one of the hosts, and alongside me is my good friend and business partner, Bob Wilson. Bob, how's it going today?
Just fine, just fine. How are you doing?
Oh, rocking and rolling. Nothing says Monday like a recording of a podcast, right?
Yes, a morning recording on a Monday. Who set this up anyway? That's what I
I
want to know.
I don't know. I don't know. We'll blame it on Leisha, our guest. How about
I
that?
think you're in charge of scheduling, Mark. We can't blame the guest.
I'm
That is
innocent always.
Yeah, that would be really bad form to blame the guest who hasn't even been introduced yet. So,
That's true. We
No
won't get many
worries.
guests if we keep doing that.
yeah. So we're really pleased to be joined by Leisha Thompson. She has created a brand new business for herself, and that's really the subject of our conversation. I got to meet her about 3 or 4 years ago as she was starting her journey, and I was about to start my journey. Leisha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with both of you.
To kind of get things started, can you explain a little bit about why you chose to start a new business? We won't give away the later in life, but let's say that we're at least a couple of decades into our business professional lives here. What prompted you to make that change? Because there's a bunch of people that are now starting to decide whether that's what they want to do or not.
Yeah, great question. I'll try to give you the shortened version, but first let me tell you my new name, which is Leisha Thompson-Young,
Hey,
which
congratulations.
is also crazy good, I guess, because I recently got married, so October 27th. So to someone I dated at the age of 18 in college. So there is, of course, a story there, but I say that because
Uh,
I that's what led me, part of my business is about moving forward, embracing, creating new opportunities.
I,
So
I'm I'm going out on a limb and assuming that there was a break in that time frame and not just a really long engagement that we're talking about here.
37 years later,
37 years. Well, some guys are a little slower at moving along. So,
I can't blame it on him. We were young when we met, 18 and 19. So you're freshmen in college. We didn't
yep.
know anything. We had
No,
no
that
idea that we were the right people, person for each other.
problem is
Well,
we thought we
he
knew everything
knew.
at the time. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So he says he
congratulations.
knew. I definitely didn't know. So anyway, so I just wanted to that's my newest announcement, I guess. But your question again was about just why or when I chose.
Primarily, why? What prompted you to leave Macy's after such a long, distinguished career and go, "Hey, it's time to write a book. It's time to launch a new leadership program under my
Yeah.
shingle." It's a big
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. So it all began fourth quarter of 2018, actually. Of course, I'll never forget. I was preparing my first quarter goals for the upcoming, year. And as we always do, fourth quarter, start prepping for the next year, first quarter of the next year. And so I realized as I was going through that process, it just wasn't hyping me up anymore, which kind of surprised me because I'd always loved what I was doing. I stayed there for 22 years because it was great. So in the moment, I just kept feeling like I just don't think I can keep doing it.
Mm.
In the same way, And so what did that look like for me? I had no idea, but I just remember giving myself a year to figure it out. So I created my exit date that quarter, and in that same quarter, like I said, giving myself a year just to work through in my thoughts and what's most meaningful. What do I want to do? How can I use all the skills that I've gained through all these years in leadership in a different way? But I also happen to have already been in a coaching program, so I thought I was coaching to become certified to help others, but being in the program is what gave me the clarity about what was most important to me. So that's how it all began.
Interesting. The reason why I kind of asked the question is Bob and I did very similar things in the last couple of years. Bob, you ran workerscompensation.com for gosh, 20 whatever years.
23 years. 23 years. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Very
all of a
similar
sudden,
timeline to
Right.
Alicia.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we got together and created Work Comp College. What was kind of the precipitating point for you, Bob, to kind of go, hey, it's time to make a change?
Well, I think there's a point where you've done everything that you can do in a particular situation, and you want to reach out into a different environment, different opportunity. And I think it presented itself. The conversation came up at the right time for me, and I just thought it was time to make a change. And I
Yeah.
think it just worked out pretty well to do that at that time. It's interesting when you do that. I describe it because I'd never really thought about this when we planned about this topic. My own father, who was an electrical engineer by trade, worked for a large, I'll say, electronics firm for many years in New Jersey. Had been in a position where he was reporting certain things in his department to the board of directors, and this is in the 60s, and was picking up a lot of feeling in the board. It was very open at the time. I'm not going to name the company, of how do we get rid of the old guys. They wanted to find a way to get rid of all the old engineers and get new engineers in that are younger and cheaper and new blood. And my father had to lay a lot of people off as part of that process. And he realized in just a few more years, he would be one of the old guys they wanted to get rid of. And he started looking around. He and my mother talked about it. At the age of 51, he quit his job, cashed in his retirement, sold his house, and invested absolutely everything in a motel, restaurant, and lounge in Colorado. Never been in business in his life, had two kids in college and two more coming behind. I never realized at the age of 10 what a gutsy move that was, but it took a lot of courage to do that. They made it work. It worked actually very well for them. It was a much better decision in the long run for his life. But it is interesting that people have different motivations to make those changes at times, and it can pay off, but it's a lot of hard work, especially in the restaurant business. I will guarantee that.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that decision is a strategic decision. Like Leisha, it sounded like maybe you were just burned out and the passion wasn't there. Your
Mm.
dad saw the writing on the wall, Bob, and goes, hey, it's time to kind of make a move different. Sometimes the situation is foisted upon you. I was laid off in July of 2021 and had to figure out what I wanted to be. I would have been very happy to have stayed where I was at for a long period of time, but that wasn't obviously meant to be. So there's a variety of reasons why you get into your 50s or 60s, in my case, that, hey, something needs to happen. Leisha, I know you talk about, in fact, for those who are watching the video, right over your head is called Reinvention. And that is not only kind of the mantra of your company, but the mantra of kind of where your head's at.
Yeah.
What is that reinvention process when you're kind of going through, whether it's forced upon you or whether you strategically kind of understand this isn't, this isn't my passion, or maybe I'm not long for this particular job. How do you wrap your head around reinvention and making that, not getting that paralysis by analysis and going, because honestly, when I first did that, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And it took me a long time to figure that out. Some people are quicker on
Mhm.
the uptake, but what is that like? What is that process like?
The process is the right word to use, Mark. It is a process and it does take time, but it also takes the ability to place ourselves in an uncomfortable position and to stay there for a little while. And that's where I think people fall off. People say they want to make changes, but when they don't have clarity instantaneously, which we will never have it in that way. But I feel like that's where a lot of people just stay. They remain there and they talk about wanting to change, but they aren't willing to put themselves in that place of uncertainty to figure it out. And figuring it out is a challenge. So it's not like that's easy. But the process that I take people through, and I changed off what I'm doing now is kind of what I thought I would do in the beginning, but I didn't want to use the word reinvention because I thought other people were using that. Other brands were saying that. And so I didn't want to be like others. But then 3 years later, I realized the first word I thought is really the right word. That is what I want to say. I want to encourage people to use your story. What's your journey been? And what did you place on the shelf because you became a parent or because your job, you loved your job, but it took everything in you to just keep up with evolving, to keep growing your career. So sometimes we lose sight. More often than not, we lose sight of the passion that we had at one time about something in our lives because we think we'll get back to it. I know I did. Mark, you're a writer, so we wrote, but it was business, not necessarily in the same way. We later started writing differently as we honed in on our personal brands. And so I love it. I've been through, we all have, I'm a former caregiver of both of my parents. That definitely changes how you see your future. And then it helps you to prioritize, because you realize that we aren't here forever. So if there are passions we've set, right. But you don't think that when we were 20, you just have no idea. And I'm okay with that. I kind of like it, actually, because it gives you power, So I try to help people bring out the power, or see that we all have inner power, but it just gets lost because we don't realize how strong you have to be to navigate through everything that we have and to get to this phenomenal time in our lives.
Mhm.
Well, I think reinvention, from what you describe, is actually a perfect word, because your alternative is new and improved. And I think that's probably been used a little bit more than reinvention.
Right.
Well,
it took me a while to figure all that part out,
and
And
there's
then it was the first thing. So I ended up going back to my first thought. That happens a lot, right? We overthink.
Kind of like your husband, when you think about it. I'm picking up a pattern here, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's
yeah.
there's another
That's
R
true.
word, I think, that's implied by what you talked about when things get uncomfortable, and being able to sit within that discomfort and see the bigger picture, and just kind of is resilience.
Yeah.
Certainly resilience is something that we have learned a lot of people didn't have during COVID, with the mental health issues and whatnot. When you talk about that other word, resilience, what does it actually mean to kind of sit in that discomfort and recognize that it's uncomfortable, but I have a bigger picture view? I need to push all my chips in the middle of the table, which is something, an allegory or metaphor that Bob and I have both used in regards to work comp college. It's like, there's a book called Burning the Boats, which is like, okay, there's no exit, there's no retreat. This is it. How do you develop that kind of mindset? It's like, I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I think it's also it. So I gained strength from my ancestors, just knowing the story, the journey of how they came to America, and then, how they persevered. And so when I think of their stories and their struggles, I've never, ever, I will never, ever endure such tragedy.
Yeah.
So who am I? How dare I complain or whine about anything when they overcame? And so I've always recognized and acknowledged that. And when I had weak moments, even as in college, there was a moment where I thought, "Oh man, I finished my sophomore year. I can't be in this city 2 more years." So maybe I'll enlist in the military, is kind of what I thought. And then I thought, okay, I need that. This is nothing. 2 more years is nothing. Get it together and then keep it moving, So perseverance, but also it comes from working out. So I want to encourage people to find out what your thing is, where you move your body, and in a way that doing that helps you to gain clarity, if that makes sense. So I've been talking about mindful movement, because a lot of people ask that question. So how do you gain strength, even just in a week? Not saying we're weak, but we have moments of doubt. And so how do you gain strength to persevere and to be resilient? And so for me, I always use an example of being in the gym and pushing through a little, when I'm tired and I want to quit. So you go into your thoughts and your soul, and you think about other times or other situations or other people who have had insurmountable challenges but didn't quit. And so I hope that maybe helps a little bit, just to frame up where you can go. Like it's, for me, it's not always mindset. It comes from my soul, what's in my heart. So I'm heart led, and I teach people how to be heart led. I think that's much more powerful than our thoughts, which kind of sometimes derail us.
Oh, I think definitely thoughts can derail you, especially when you're insecure or you're facing the unknown. And for a lot of people at a certain age, any age really, to step out into something totally new is the
Oh,
unknown.
yeah.
I think, from experience, a little bit of experience, I think I've learned you almost have to, you've got to be willing to take the risk. You've got to be willing to put it all out there, but you also have to appreciate the small wins in the short game.
Yeah.
I have a cousin in Canada. He and his wife were down earlier this year. We had dinner, and he started a software company 25 years ago and did very well, but his first few years were a struggle, and he was talking, he was impressed, almost impressed, or thought I was crazy at the age of 63 or 60, to step out and start a new business. But he said, he remembered in the days where he got a big, a good check from a client, and he was able to tell his employees, you know what this means? It means we get paid for the next 2 months. There was cash in the bank. But that's a win. Those are the short-term wins on that short game that you have to, I think, learn to appreciate in that process.
And it takes a while to even see the wins, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because it's easier to see where you're not winning based on your definition of what a win is.
Absolutely. Well, like Mark said, you put all your chips in, and at some point you're going to have a lot fewer chips before you have more chips. So it just is the nature of the game, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes I think having past wins, even if it's not wins associated with your new vision, but it's past wins of previous things that you've done, you've demonstrated that you have been able to succeed. You've also demonstrated you've been able to fail. And I have done both. But I think, when I was casting forward, it's like, can I do this? I have done things in the past that was a little bit uncomfortable. That was a shakeup. I went from being a technologist into workers' compensation, doing sales and marketing, which is like the complete polar opposite. Technology, you slide a pizza under the door, and 24 hours later you get code. They don't talk to people very much, but in sales and marketing, you got to talk to people. So going back to the fact that I had been successful in some occasions, said I can do that again. And is that something that you kind of have seen as well? Is that even if you don't have even the small victories right now, the victories that you've had in the past show that you have had a track record of being successful?
Yeah, and then just trusting yourself, to win. Sometimes being competitive with ourselves, if that makes sense, to win, like bet on yourself to win, because we can, like everyone can win. Of course, we get to choose what winning means in every situation, but that's kind of how I look at it as well. Like it'll be all right. When I launched, the pandemic happened 2 weeks later, and I was sitting in my office, had never worked in my home either, other than one day a week. So everything was against me in that moment that I thought about it. And I had taken a position at Amazon when I left Macy's Bloomingdale's corporate, and I quit that position. So 2 weeks later, it was kind of crazy.
Nothing like timing, right?
Yeah. And it made me have second thoughts. But then I thought, no, I did this on purpose. I created this thought process on purpose. So
I can definitely relate with that. We started workerscompensation.com in September of 1999, developing the site with a formal launch on January 1st, 2000. And if you remember back to that time of the dot-com bubble and the absolute insanity around domain names and websites and web-based businesses, and that bubble burst about 3 weeks after we launched. It was like showing up at a huge party 2 seconds ahead of the cops. That's really pretty much what it felt like. Where's everybody going? And you have to reassess and retrench and revise. You have to be able to respond to that. And it was a change. And unfortunately, timing wasn't great. We were supposed to be on our yachts in another year or two. We were going to be off and retired and on our yachts, but that didn't quite work out.
Retrench. I like that.
Well, reinvention was taken, so I had
don't take my word.
So is new and improved. So,
well, and Bob, I appreciate the alliteration of constantly using our words. I think we have definitely reached the theme here.
Well, you pointed out for people watching the video that she has reinvention over her head. I think you really should point that out for people on the audio version that she has reinvention over her head. That's really where it would be applicable.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's funny.
Alicia, you mentioned being heart-led, and that means really, truly understanding who you are, what your priorities are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, who your network is that you can count on, the skill set that you have. most people, I think that they know who they are and what their priorities are and what their strengths and weaknesses are. But honestly, I think most people just kind of they've they've skated to some extent. They've gotten the job, they've gotten that they wanted, and so they kind of do that. So they don't really understand what really drives them. How do you
Yeah.
dive into understanding your heart, which is not the physical muscle, but it's kind of that inner being, that understanding of who you are? How do you get to that point of really understanding? Because I think unless you understand fully who you are and what you can bring, you'll never have that resilience. You'll never have that ability to be in that discomfortable zone while until you get those victories.
Uh, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't believe most people have any clue. Because when people are working with me and I can sense that they kind of think they know what they want for their next, but they don't know what their skills, they know what their tangible skills are for their career. But I mean, as far as who they are, having been through some life changes, most people have no idea of what their values are. So I generally start with core values and I ask people, and I usually get the silent look with the glazed over eyes. And I just kind of wait and smile. And I go, yeah, just, work with me. I'll give you some time. And we start with, I used to say, give me 10. What are your 10 top core values? It takes a while to even figure out what your 5 are. So it's easier just to say, okay, well, let's start there. And people can generally say that. And then we drill down. So then I end up with, well, what's your number one that you refuse to ever sacrifice, no matter what happened in your life? What's the one value that you will stand on forever? And so that takes a while, right, to process that. But once people know that, and that's the reinvention right there, just to even know, because our core values today definitely are not what they were. For example, when my first child was born, my core values were different because it was all about her and what that means as a new mom and things of that nature. So I think we have such amazing opportunities in life as we continue forward, but becoming self-aware is just really key. And it's not selfish to become self-aware. And think of ourselves, especially if you're a giver or you're a teacher, a leader. It's usually always about everyone else as it should be, but sometimes we get lost in that whole equation. I'm sure you all have as well because of leadership careers. And so we're not waking up thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about everything else. So
That
it's
that
kind
is
of foreign.
Yeah, I think that is very true. I think people, and it's uncomfortable for people to think of themselves in that respect. A lot of people don't do
Hmm.
that.
Right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well,
Yeah.
and it takes time and it takes introspection. It takes some quiet time. In today's livelihood, very few people will spend, specifically quiet time to kind of figure out where they
Oh,
are and what
yeah.
they want to do. We're immediately hit the ground running with checking emails on our phones as soon as we wake up and that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
having that quiet time. How do you set aside that you obviously have guided, you've not only lived the life, but now you're helping other people kind of do that same thing.
Yeah.
How do you get people to invest in themselves and understand what they are? Because I think without that, they'll never, to your point, they'll never reinvent themselves
Yeah.
because they don't even know who they are and what's important to them.
Right. Being purposeful is necessary, and so helping people to create new habits around. And it took me a while too. So everything I teach and know is because at some time it wasn't present in my life, and I didn't know, I wasn't aware. But then because of going through life changing phases of life, life changing phases or aspects is a better word. That's what helped me to pause because I struggled with what's next, primarily after my parents passed 10 months apart. And of course, I was devastated. But then my own mortality became a thought for the first time, like, wait a minute. So, you know, there's so much more that I would like to accomplish that I previously didn't realize how important it was. And so because of my own journey, I can lean into and know that a lot of people have similar thoughts around that. And so creating habits around what, carving out, and I help people use the calendar on your phone to block time for yourself like you would for every meeting, every other aspect of what you do in your career, because we're constantly changing gears, right? All through our workday. But why not just carve out, is it 30 minutes? Is it 60 minutes? Whatever it is, as a meeting for yourself, because we are that important also. And use that 30 minutes or whatever it is to just sit down and prioritize, like, what is meaningful, what is important. Going to the gym, because we often think we don't have time to work out, but you do if that's a meeting that you schedule to yourself. Same as thinking about what's next. If you were to relaunch your life in a different direction, what's important to have in it now that we didn't have previously? Because again, we lost sight of what our passions were. And so, Mark, I'm going to defect to you. Would you say for you, writing maybe has always been a passion?
Well, it has, and I'm not as prolific a writer as Bob. Bob's cluttered
Is it
desk,
Bob?
yeah, it has had
Well,
probably 10 times the amount of stuff that I did. But when I was going through, when I initially got laid off, I created a blog, and it was Countdown to Zero, which was the zero was when I was no longer going to get a paycheck, and there was a
Mhm.
severance, package to some degree. And so I was very honest and transparent. Here's my attitude. Here's my mindset. Here's the victories. And I put it out there. And I got a couple of people saying that's TMI. I don't really care about your particular story. But most people said, I've been there. I appreciate the honesty, or I can see myself through you. And
Mhm.
so it became somewhat therapeutic for me. So it was more about me, I guess, kind of a diary, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it did end up helping people and fostering conversations with other people who were either going through that, had gone through that, saw the writing on the wall, similar to Bob's father. Bob, from a
Mhm.
writing standpoint, you're all over the board in regards to, being funny, being serious, taking on, important subjects. How does that help you kind of process things in your mind?
well, it's funny, and since we started work comp college, I have been writing significantly less than I was prior. It seems like you almost find your creative energies being directed elsewhere, and the need, or whatever. I started my blog back in 2011, just thinking I would write, with the frequency of pre-Mussolini trains in Italy. They may or may not come because I just didn't know. But I really found I really enjoyed it, and it really became an outlet for me, to write about things that were just important, or things that crossed my desk that caught my eye. But I also found, from a career perspective, it brought a lot of opportunity. And I mean, I write. Everyone knows I'm not politically correct, and I know I can offend. And while I do care, I really don't. I mean, I mean, there are things that sometimes need to be said, and we need to all be able to have that dialogues and conversations. And I'm sure at some point that was viewed as negative by some people, like, but I actually found the opportunity to start speaking in the industry came from the writing in my blog. Had a lot of great reception, and I think I found it was almost felt like community. Was getting a lot of support from people, and I was getting good feedback, and it just was really something I really looked forward to doing I wrote about 3 times a week, for 10 years. And there was just some really neat stuff that came out of that, and some neat relationships, I think, that came out of that. And so it was important. I'm going to change the subject just a little bit. And Leisha, this may not be appropriate to your practice, because I sense I'm going to make an assumption, that you spend more time dealing with boomers and Xers than younger generations at this point, because we're talking about later in life reinvention. But have you had the opportunity to see if there are any generational differences in the way demographic groups, generations, from a generation perspective, are willing to do that introspection and willing to take that risk? Because I get a sense, when we talk about
Mhm.
millennials, and even the Gen Z that are following them, that there's almost more of an entrepreneurial potential in that group than there were with boomers. I mean, I'm a boomer. I'm 64 years old now. Mark, your birthday's coming up, isn't it? It's a
It
very soon.
is. Thanks, older brother.
Yeah, you're going to be 64 too, you young whippersnapper. Respect your elders, boy. But I think the you know, as a boomer, I was raised that, you know, you're going to grow up, you're going to get a job, you're going to take care of your family, and if you don't like your job, suck it up and do your job and take care of your family. You know, there was
Yeah.
not a lot of work-life balance. In fact, that was not even a phrase.
Nope.
Have you had the opportunity? I don't know if you've worked with some younger people. Do you see generational differences in their ability?
Yeah, I do. And I applaud them actually, because I'm a
Good.
boomer also. And I niched down to working with people 50 plus, kind of because of the struggle. At 50, people realize, wait a minute, you know, what is my true purpose? What is my
Yeah.
meaning? That's when people start questioning, which is why I like working with people around that age. Some of my clients are mid 40s, but I have also worked with some millennials, but they ask legit questions like, why does it take so long to get to director level? Someone asked me, you know, when I was still at Macy's and Bloomingdale's, here I was proud of it until that question came.
Yeah.
And so
Why
it
did
made
it
me
take you
think.
so long? Really?
Right. And so I was thinking, I'm not old, like, but I had longevity at the corporation. They aren't looking for longevity in any type of for any employer. Maybe not. I shouldn't say it that way. Many of them are not seeking longevity, nor should they, is what I've come to appreciate, because they take calculated risk a lot sooner, and they are very much risk tolerant. And so, and we in our era, to your point, that wasn't something that was taught at all for many of us because of being safe, maybe. But then you realize in the workplace there are a lot of people who are bitter because they've not made changes, and so I just don't understand why anyone would be okay living that way and then risking losing happiness or joy or minimizing how important those emotions are as well.
I think that's a great point, and I would just surmise that for a lot of people, the known is still less challenging or scary than the unknown.
Yeah.
They may hate their current job, they may hate what they do, but oops, excuse me. Oh, we're gonna have to edit this part out. I'm screwing up my mic, hitting things here. Um, it's safe, you know, and I think that the unknown is a very frightening thing for a lot of people. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, but the millennials are also very focused on having side hustles, if
Yeah,
not full-fledged businesses. And they don't seem to mind if the first or the second time they tried didn't work. They
Mhm.
keep it moving
yeah, that's
instead of
interesting.
being defeated. And so I applaud that. It makes all the sense in the world, though. So it's just an interesting conversation because they're very sincere. I've never had a conversation. I'm around a lot of millennials because my kids are, and so now I'm known as auntie to several of them.
Yeah.
But they'll call because they just want to, or they'll stop by or whatever because they just want to share what's going on and things of
Yeah,
that nature to make sure that they're, you know, thinking in the right direction. And so that's how I know. And that's why I applaud that they don't live the way that
yeah,
baby boomers
yeah.
have in many instances.
I think I've started giving a presentation at a couple different places on generational differences in the workplace. We've got 5 generations in the workforce right now, and we all
Yeah.
have different attitudes and views, and we're raised in different environments. Um, but I do think that the younger generations are getting somewhat of a bad rap, but they always do from the older generations. I'm
Mhm.
happy to tell them that, you know, I'm a boomer and I know better than any of them in the room, but because yeah, I think we do, and I'm finding the same thing that you. I'm not surprised by your answer, and that's actually good to hear. Encouraged by that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because someone's going to
In
have to pay my Social Security. That's all I know.
well, in the beginning, when the millennials started, leaving jobs rather quickly, it bothered me. So I kind of had to sit with that for a while, work through my own feelings around why they were quick to peace out. But then I came to recognize that it's not all negative at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's good. Good thing.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, we have come to the end of the 30 minutes. We're trying to stay plus or minus that. Leisha, any final quick words, kind of summarization of what we've talked about? We're really trying to create some actionable items for people who listen to the podcast, and I think they've certainly pulled out some nuggets throughout this. But any final last word that you want to leave folks?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind quickly is being willing to be a teacher and a student simultaneously. I would like to encourage people to step into that, because we have a lot of skills that we've gained through life and also career, but we are never too old to want to learn new things, new concepts, to be relevant. Please be relevant. Please want to be relevant until the end is what I would hope. Because a lot of people will leave, retire and just have no clue of what they want to do, and that's just not attractive. So be willing to be a teacher and a student. That's a great combination, I think.
Good balance.
Yeah, good balance. Yeah.
Lifelong learners and lifelong mentoring. Because
Yes.
regardless, as old as I am, I've got a lot of experience that I can share with other people, and I enjoy that conversation. But I also recognize I do not know everything I need to know, and I still make a lot of mistakes. So
yeah, no mistakes, just a little misstep.
there you go. There you go. I like
they're
that.
teachable moments.
Teachable moments. There you go. Bob, any final word?
No, I think this has been a great conversation, and I think there's some really good information that a lot of people in our industry haven't really had to think about. I mean, we're in a unique industry because we can do an awful lot of good things, but there's a lot of hard process-driven work out there that can burn people out. And I think that's there's some pretty good lessons here, even if they choose to stay in the current position, choosing to become that teacher and mentor and help develop others and work with others and learn, particularly across generations, multi-generation. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to teach, and there's a lot to learn from different generations. Especially from boomers. You got to learn everything from boomers because, basically Gen X is basically sitting around waiting for us to die so they can have our parking spots. But, that's